Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast. Don't know if you're like me, but every fishing day should start the right way, and that's with a proper breakfast. So I've sat in Bampton, I'm local, and had a really nice breakfast, good coffee to start the day. I'm catching up with a good friend of mine, and I was thinking about how long I've known him, and I think it's something like 18 years that we've been fishing together, and I'm ashamed that he's not been on here sooner, but I'm really pleased to say that we're going to do some fishing together. We're standing on the River Exe at the moment on the town water. The water is absolutely crystal clear. It's good timing as well, because this is the Monday after the British Fly Fair even. And my friend probably had one of the biggest presents there. He was the man behind, up until 4 years ago, a much loved and a much respected business, Funky Fly Tying. But more importantly is my fishing friend and my good friend, Toby Merrigan. And we're going to chat today. We're going to see if we can find a grayling or two. It's the sort of last gasp grayling fishing really of the season. I've barely done any, but we're going to see if we can find a grayling or two for you as well, and talk about lots of other stuff along the way as well. But mate, Toby, it's great to have you along on the Fly Culture Podcast. How you doing, my friend?
Fantastic, Pete. Thanks very much. It's been long overdue that we've got to get out on the river. It's been ages, mate, isn't it, that we've been fishing together?
Absolutely. And I know we speak, and we've also we had one short session, didn't we, on the tour back end of summer when the weather was starting to come right, but we had a little bit of a go there. But the river's looking, you can see actually how big the Exe has been, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely massive. I mean, I've never seen this river come up so quickly in my life, really. I mean, we're stood here at the moment. The water's super low actually now, crystal clear, and 3-4 foot above our heads, and we're by the river edge here. There's huge logs and debris where the river came up. I mean, luckily I don't think too many houses were damaged, but it's amazing how it changes a riverbed when you have such a flood on a spate river like the Exe. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can find a few today, because they might not be in the usual spots that they possibly would be normally.
It'll be fun seeing. I guess what's happened here as well, with all this water, that it has washed a lot of the silt out, and that's possibly why the water's so clear right now, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, normally you come down here and obviously, we all have issues with maybe the way that the countryside's looked after these days. There's normally a bit of algae. It's pretty slippery, but at the moment it's looking absolutely tasty. Where I live in Bampton, 50 yards away, we've got a tiny little river. I've been down there, had a look this morning, seen a few graylings. So hopefully we're going to be in for a bit of fun today.
Nice. And actually, I'm looking over the other side. I can see a bike, a shopping trolley, all sorts of stuff. And that's probably 15 feet up from the water as well. And that gives a little bit of a clue. Like Toby was saying, there's some huge chunks of tree that have been washed right up onto the pathway, and it gives us an idea of how it is. We're going to fish. Toby's one of the first people, actually, that I used to fish side by side with, and we'd take it in turns. And actually, I'm kind of thinking the very first piece I wrote for Eat Sleep Fish was a day that we'd had together fishing. And so we've set up 2 rods. I've got a Bannister bamboo rod. I bought a reel at the show as well, an LH design, which if you look at my personal social media I put up, it's probably one of the most beautiful things I've seen. So I'm going to give that a go today with a bamboo rod. I'm going to use an indicator, just a New Zealand yarn indicator, and then just probably a nymph, and see how I get on. So that'll be fun. And then you've got it looks like what have you got there, mate? Nymphing rod and stuff?
Yeah, so I've got a nymphing rod. What have I got today? I'm terrible. I just grab whatever's in the back of my van. So today I'm using a Sandro Soldrini Hydropsyche. This is a rod that Sandro gave me a few years ago, actually, when I was distributing Soldrini products in the UK. It's a lovely nymphing rod, and I thought we'd do something different. I knew you'd been bringing the boo out, so I thought, you can have the boo. I'll have the slightly more high tech, shall we say? Although these days bamboo's super high tech anyway. And we'll just stand side by side, chewing the fat, and swap rods over. I really want to have a cast of that because I've got a beautiful Luke Bannister cane rod as well that I absolutely love. So it'll be interesting to see what we do today.
Fantastic. And I hope you'll enjoy joining us. We've got so much to catch up on, and we've done so much fishing together in so many different places. And I'd love you to come along with us on this fishing trip today. So first thing I've noticed when I've got in is the temperature of the water. Hardly surprisingly, it's pretty cool. I thought I saw something. I think it was probably me hoping more than anything else that I'd seen a fish rise. But there's been a fair few midge about as well. When I was recording the first segment of this, that I saw, I thought I saw a fish rise, but we're sort of working a run. It's sort of, the river here, just to put it in context, I think as the West Country goes, this is near as a proper freestone water comparable to the other streams in the West Country. It's how it feels to me anyway. And so it's not, there are deep pots in here, don't get me wrong, but it's relatively wide. I would say it's probably 75 feet across, possibly a little bit more. Not super deep. We got a weir probably 100 yards ahead of us that we'll have a look at, but we're sort of standing, if you're looking downstream on the true right bank, there's a lot of trees around, and where we're standing here there's a branch that's come right out into the water, and it's created a little bit of a run, and it looks the right sort of spot for a fish to hold. I've sort of made a few casts. I thought Toby had a fish then. With the bamboo rod and just a single nymph. I've got like an olive nymph on, and as I said, I've got that New Zealand yarn indicator, and I'm really enjoying just making a few casts. I don't usually fish the bamboo in the winter, so Warren and I think had a spell last year before last, where we thought, okay, let's give it a go, and we got our arses whooped, but I thought it might be just fun to try. Toby's fishing now just in front of me with a couple of nymphs, and it's nice watching him fish the flies, flipping them out, and just manipulating as well, dead drifting a few drifts, and they're just a tiny little tip, moving the rod tip just a tiny little bit to manipulate the flies to see if that brings someone into play. I'm really lucky as well. I'm not bad at spotting fish myself, but Toby's one of the people I know that probably, I don't know many better who are spotting at fish than him, so I'm hoping he might be able to pick one out for us. But he's just on the bottom there, so we got the right sort of depth there as well, so we're in good shape from that point of view, and yeah, we'll see how we get on. Not come very far, nothing's changed dramatically. Toby was saying I've been sort of trying to fish the flatter, even flow of the water, but of course that's speeding up as I'm getting nearer to the weir now at the moment. Toby, like I said, this being more freestone like, Toby could get across the river really easily and has worked the far side as well. He said to me there was a bit more gravel than he remembered when he was last down here. Seen some fry as well, which is encouraging given everything they've had to contend with. So we'll continuing going up. It's interesting though, he's not touched a fish yet, fishing the way that he is, and neither have I. And there's often where you're sitting thinking, right, well, I'm fishing the nymph under an indicator, I may miss a take or it may not register. I don't feel so bad about it. And like I said before, I'm really, really enjoying fishing this method right now as well. So it's been great fun from that point of view. So yeah, I'll keep going. You may be able to hear the noise of the water running over the small weir here at the moment. It's the first time I've felt really a little undergunned with just a nymph and an indicator. But Toby's been fishing this water. My money's on him here, but it's still been pretty quiet. And I'm surprised, it looks just absolutely right, but doesn't it always? Water, like we said, absolutely crystal clear. I'm stepping up, hardly surprisingly, the other side of the weir now is much, much flatter water. And maybe, I don't know how deep it is here, just up through there, but there may be the chance of spotting a fish, and I'll have a look at the back as the water starts to run down, see if I can see anything. I've sort of got half an eye on Toby as well. I'm expecting a shout, but it's just nice when you fish with a friend, you can say something and then you don't feel like you've got to say something just to break any silence. We're both just enjoying the company of the river, the company of each other, and pointing stuff out if anything's happened or you noticed anything. And Toby, like I said, knows this water a little bit as well, and was saying he was surprised that we hadn't caught a fish here yet, but that's just how it plays out. And again, it may be that I'm not set up the right way. I've changed my nymph, actually. I put a very small perdigon on just to see. It's got a tiny little orange band on it. I thought it might get me down. It might cut through the water just a little bit quicker. So I'll see how I get on with that. It's kind of cool. It's sort of semi-urban fishing. And I think if you've read friend of fly culture, Theo Pike's book about urban streams, it's almost got a semi-urban feel to it, in as best as the West Country can. And there's a footpath along the river, and I'm watching people sort of walking along there at the moment. Now, the reason I mentioned Theo's book as well is that I think one of the rivers he mentions in it is called the Lowman, and the Lowman is just running into the river here. So Theo, if you're listening, you'll know exactly where we're standing right now. Sort of thrown the bamboo rod in Toby's hand. Like he mentioned, he's got one of Luke's super fast rods, and I wanted him to have a go of this just to see what he thought as well. The back of this pool is, as I hope, that I'm sure with Toby's skills, it's getting a little bit deeper, and the far side it looks a little bit deeper. Toby said he had some fish from here, but it's a lovely, again, flat, even flow. And what are you thinking, bud?
Oh, I'm just thinking this is a very, very, very nice rod, actually. I haven't cast bamboo since last summer, and that was just with dry fly and stuff. And it's nice to get something a bit different back in your hand. You know, I tend to get a bit bored sometimes of nymphing in the winter, and it's nice just to do something a bit different. River's looking in such good condition. What I'm really worried about, though, really, is the lack of fish at the moment. Normally, we fished a few really good honey holes just to get a fish and, you know, get your confidence up. I can only assume maybe the floods have had a bit of an effect.
Do you think perhaps as well the temperature, we've seen that drop up a little bit, and we know how sensitive, you know, the water temperature is still cold, there's no two ways about that, but we've had the air temperature has warmed up a little bit the last couple of days, and in my simple understanding, sometimes Grayling like steady conditions. Do you think that's something to do with it, or you think it is more still them sort of recovering from what they've had to contend with over the winter period?
I think you're probably right, Pete. I mean, we haven't really had that settled weather over, you know, the last couple of weeks. You know, we've had heavy rain, frosts. We've had everything that could be thrown at it. Maybe there's a bit of salt still in the water because, you know, the river here, just a few hundred yards away, goes underneath one of the major roads going to North Devon, and, you know, maybe there's some surface runoff, that sort of thing, that's put the fish off a bit, but I'm sure we'll find some. We normally do, but, you know, as we've always said, Pete, it's not about catching, is it? When we go fishing together, it's about just catching up as friends more than anything. You know, I think we've both fished for long enough now that, of course, we love to catch fish, but the reality is, you know, it's about the day more than anything, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lovely spot, this as well. And as I said, I'm hoping Toby's supervision comes in here and he spots us a fish as well. Like I say, he just lifted in something there. There's midges again on the water, and it's the first day that I think they're saying, they did say that the sun's supposedly breaking through. There is a little bit of blue sky. The sun is breaking through the trees actually to our right on the far bank. So you never know. The nice thing about this is it looks like the sun's going to come behind us. And as I actually speak, that sun's coming through now as well. So you never know. That may have a small impact on things for us as well. Might bring the fish up a little bit as well. So we'll keep trying. And I know there's a spot round the corner that can be useful for or productive for Grayling as well. But it's kind of nice, as I said, just chucking a line out and talking. And, you know, in the introduction, Toby, I sort of said about your old business, funky fly tying, and how we've just come back from the BFFI. I know we talked in the week and you were thinking about going and stuff like that. Is there part of you, because you had in your stand, and I saw Pete Wilkins, I saw Alex Jardine, I saw so many people who were on your stand, and you had probably one of the biggest presences there. Is there a little bit of you that misses it, or not? You're perfectly happy to sort of have moved on, really?
Look, I made an awful lot of friends in the fishing world, and I think that's the thing that I miss maybe as much, traveling all over Europe, doing fishing shows, meeting people that you only meet once or twice a year. And that's what I miss more than anything. Oh, I think I had a little take then. Yeah, I do miss it. But at the same time, I think that it was the right time to move on. I can feel proud that I had a successful business. I still get people coming up to me saying, "Oh, Toby, it's a shame you still haven't got it, blah, blah, blah." I think what I miss more than anything is the people within it.
Yeah, and you were a big presence in it as well. And for me, it was, as I said in the intro, our friendship goes back beyond that. And I'm sure we'll touch on that at some stage. But it was funny. I think, we used to fish so much together, and that was simply because you had a little bit more time, didn't you? I remember the days where we'd be out fishing somewhere or other, and you'd be saying, "Yeah, what I'm hoping is 10 orders today, and I've got to go now because I've got to go to." And it was wonderful seeing how that business grew over those years into something which was a magnificent business that somebody else wanted to buy. So, that speaks volumes in itself. But also, how that grew. And the growth, I think a lot of it was down to you as a front person of that I think that helped, and you knew so many people, and your character and your personality, and most of all, your big heart as well. But also your ability to find products, and I think that was one of your great skills as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing that I enjoyed, I think, the most, was actually recognising a deficiency or a demand for product that wasn't readily available, or maybe thinking outside the box and finding something, and actually finding stuff that people want that's a bit different. And for me, that's what kind of turned me on in the industry. It was trying to push the boundaries and not be the same as everyone else out there. And I think I did that pretty successfully. It helped having good friends in different areas of the world, and picking their brains. Things like bringing in Colin's hackle. What an amazing hackle that was, completely different to, say, your whiting, which I used to do huge quantities of as well. Completely different, but absolutely amazing. I used to get a lot of stuff from the States, but also have my stuff manufactured myself. And I think when you're able to control the quality of something, that makes a big difference. And I've always said, you can never be the cheapest, but you can be the best that you can with quality. And I always felt that it was better to do that and offer better quality products, than just try and, make things as cheap as possible.
Yeah, and it was fascinating to see. I remember seeing the logos when you sent me the logos when, that was coming over, and you asked myself and Emma what we thought about them. And it was lovely to see that growth tied around our fishing adventures. And of course, our fishing adventures got a little bit less because you became so busy. You took on premises and everything else that went with that as well. And it became a big business very, very quickly. And I was thinking about what you said, the rod you were using, the Solderini, which I'm a big fan of as well. I think they're very, very good. I remember... Oh, he's got one. Nice. Oh, he's got a nice Grayling as well. How cool is that? And that's perfect timing. Probably, £1.25, something like that? Yeah, on the bamboo as well. Yeah. So it just goes to show it can work. That's in the net. Nicely done, mate. And that just goes to show it can work if you believe in something. And I was almost in that faster water thinking to myself, I wonder, should I be fishing much heavier? Should I change it? Okay, I may not be as good in that water, but stepped up quickly Toby's thrown one out, and it wasn't that many casts. He's been making a few while we've been fishing, and he's got a beautiful little grayling, River X grayling. I think the flies come out in the net as well, which is perfect, which looks absolutely fantastic. So the day's underway, and it's the way we may not have expected it as well, mightn't it? I'd have put, if you'd have asked me as a slight gambling man, who would find a fish with a certain technique, it probably would have been the Euro nymphing style, but it's kind of nice. It's right for this sort of water, isn't it?
Absolutely, perfect for it. And like I said to you just as we were fishing before you came on, I had fish out of this little spot last time, not many. And, I was saying to you, I'm a bit surprised that we've not had very many yet, but maybe they've just moved around in the floods. And that's the beauty of fishing a river, is you can come to it one day and it can fish completely different to the day that you went last time, And so you're always thinking, you're always trying to outsmart the fish, really. And, grayling are one of those fish that sometimes they can be super easy and you can do no wrong. I remember fishing the Wiley with you many, many years ago, and we got bored of catching fish because it was just, virtually every cast. And then other days you can go out and maybe only get one or two or even blank. And, you think, the river kicked my ass then. But isn't that the joy of fishing?
Absolutely. And coming back to what we were saying about the tackle and stuff like that, and there's another story. There's so many things that we've done that have been amusing, funny, just good fishing times. But I was thinking about when you were taking Solderini on, and we were fishing somewhere in Hampshire because we were staying in the Three Cups in Stockbridge. We'd had something nice to eat, and I can't remember where we'd been fishing, if we would go, and if it was the Wiley or not. And I remember your dear old Audi estate when we fished you ripped the front of that off, didn't you? Trying to drive over a bridge, didn't you?
Yeah. I'm terrible with my vehicles. I very much view them as a tool of the job. It's definitely not something that I look after. Not like my fishing gear. And even then, to be honest, I'm not overly precious. I mean, I've been very fortunate to try hundreds of different types of rods, reels, lines. And, there's certain things that suit me, certain things that suit someone else. But, the quality of tackle these days that's available, Pete, I'm sure you'd agree with me, is, it's hard to find something that's completely rubbish. But I do think that we should, as people, be supporting, the likes of the smaller artisan companies. I know you've got an amazing reel on here that you picked up over the weekend, and I use something similar from someone in Holland, a guy called It's Schuken. He does some amazing stuff, titanium reels and all of that. And, I think if we don't use these people, then the skills that they have are going to die out. And obviously something I mentioned to you, looking at the pictures of the BFFI as well, is the age of people. I mean, I'm 45 now, so I'm no spring chicken myself, but I would count myself as one of the young boys in the industry, one of the young boys fishing. And, that's got to be a worry, hasn't it?
I think you're dead right. And there were signs of it, and there was a really cool guy I spoke to on Mark's Alternative Tackle, and he was talking to me about the Stefan rod because he'd listened to it. Turned out, oh, look, is that large dark olive going down there?
I don't think it is.
No.
I think your eyesight...
Yeah, it is. I told you my eyesight's not as good. I was getting excited. But I was talking to a really cool guy, and we were talking about Stefan Blanks, and he said he'd listened to the podcast. And I kind of like, as I've said many times on here, these sort of... esoteric, slightly different bits and pieces. And as Toby said, artisan, and the same, I remember describing that to Luke Bannister when I first had him on, and he said, well, I don't know. And then by the time we came round to the end of the podcast, he was sort of kind of in agreement that perhaps artisan's the right term, and that money goes right into their pockets as well, and that's important to me as well. So I think that's cool, isn't it?
It is, and the thing is, these guys are passionate about the sport, and then they go and buy things, outside. I was looking the other day on a website, and funnily enough, I'm lucky enough to go over to Panama in a few months' time, and I was looking for these like sun shirts to protect you from the UV rays, and guess whose name come up as recommending this shirt? Luke Bannister. So it goes to show that he's very much an artisan in the traditional sense. And yet he's thinking about all these more modern things as well. So, you don't have to fish cane rods and upstream dry fly. You can fish as we're doing with an amazing cane rod, an artisan reel, a line designed in the UK, and actually have fun. And the key to it is fun, I think. Too many people take things a bit too seriously in life, don't they?
Yeah, and I think you're dead right. And over-analysing stuff, and I've been on the verge of it there. I try and understand why I have or haven't caught a fish, but sometimes they're going to bite and sometimes they're not. Sometimes we can make them bite as well. But it was interesting as well, coming back to the fishing there, that while we were talking, you said we'd had a couple of knocks. Do you think that may have been perhaps a small pod of fish, and you touched a couple of them and then got perhaps the bigger one from the pod?
Possibly, yeah. I think that, certainly on the X, when it gets a bit colder, as with all grayling, they tend to pod up or shoal up. Now, you don't get the massive shoals that you can in some other rivers. So it's 2 or 3 fish here, 2 or 3 fish there. Of course, where there's a real honey hole, like I thought we were going to have below that weir there, normally you can get sort of half a dozen fish out of there, no issues whatsoever. But today it wasn't to be. You fished one side, I fished the other, completely different methods. And I think I had one bump, which I'm pretty certain was a fish, but of course you can never tell, can you?
No, and that's kind of cool, and it's been fun to see a fish and even capture one on mic as well. So that's kind of cool from that point of view as well. So that's cool. But again, this flatter pool runs up. The river's a bit narrower here as well, so it's probably only 50 feet across, something like that.
Did you see that, Pete? There was a bird that just shot out. I think it was a wagtail. Took a fly and came back in. So maybe we're getting to the point now of a few, fly hatching. And this time of year, sometimes you can only have an hour of fishing, really good fishing. When the fish turn on, they maybe look up. We can get a dry fly on super quick on this little rig here and catch 2 or 3 fish. And then, that's it, really.
Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed for that. So we're still fishing on the true right bank as you look downstream, and we were both agreeing, funnily enough, on our side. It's I'm thigh deep in the water at the moment. For most people, it's probably ankle deep or something like that. But the run here is that nice even flow that I keep banging on about. But it's very, very nice and flat, and it's the sort of place that I would hope perhaps a grayling may hang out, and we may even, with the sun behind us now, get a look at a fish at some stage. But I was just thinking about it as we were fishing, that I often get contacted by people about whether they want to be a guide, they want to work in the industry. And I know I had Simon Holm on, who's made that leap into the industry and is loving every second of it. But did you find that hard, Toby, going from, do your previous job and you were in the clothing industry, but did you find it turning your passion, your pastime into an earner? Was that a difficult, or was it because it was a slower transition that you sort of kept the other job going whilst you were building Funky? Was it a difficult one to get into?
Yes and no. So, I mean, as you say, I used to be an agent selling menswear. So, certain times of the year were super busy for me, other times not quite so busy. So, Funky started because I couldn't find any. I was really into my predator fly fishing at the time, and I couldn't find materials that I wanted readily available. And I came across something, a fibre, and when I got it home, my wife said, "Oh, they look like funky fibres," and that's where the name come from, funky fly tying. I thought, well, there's very much a tradition, a stigma that it's an old man's sport, and I wanted to try and do something completely different to everyone else in, the industry. So I tried to make it slightly more modern, more interesting, and that's really where it came from. And yet you touched on it earlier, it's me saying, 1, 2 orders a day, 4, 5 orders a day, 10 orders, and it was a gradual build-up. We did some really good business over the years, but like anything and everything, when you get recessions and things like that, a lot of people start looking at trying to supplement their income. And what I found, especially in this industry, is that there are a lot of people out there that just did it on price, and would try and undercut, not really make profit, or if they did, they weren't paying the VAT, they weren't paying the and it did become harder, and you had to be very, very mobile in your business thinking to try and, make sure that you had the latest and greatest. Did you see the fish rise then? Yeah. So that's just had a lovely head and tail. Sorry to cut across that, but that was, I'm pretty certain that was a grayling. I'd be surprised if it was a trout this time of year. It wasn't hard to do. It was hard to let go of the consistent income before and actually go, right, this is going to be our job now. And it was a family business. It got to critical mass and it grew and grew. And I have to say, you said earlier that I was the front man, but behind the scenes, I had a couple of people that were absolutely fantastic. None more so than my younger sister, who actually, to be honest, she ran the business. She was awesome. And she was with me right till the day that I sold it. I'm very proud of the help that she's given me.
That's really, really cool to hear. And was it a difficult adjustment? Because, I've always seen you as, without blowing smoke up your arse, a mover and a shaker in the industry. So was that a difficult adjustment to make from being in the centre of it to all of a sudden not a player in quite the same way? Was that difficult to come to terms with at first?
100%. And it's really funny you should say that, because a friend of mine yesterday on social media put something up saying he only ever seems to hear from people when they want something from him. And I kind of replied to him and said, you know what? Everyone wants to be your mate when you can be useful to them. And then suddenly, when you're not quite so useful, you see who your true friends are. Now, it doesn't mean people have got to contact me every day and, anything. Pete, myself and you were best of buddies, and sometimes we might not speak to each other for a few weeks, but we pick up like we spoke to each other 5 minutes ago, and that's a true sign of friendship. And I'm super blessed that I've got some amazing friends, and like I said earlier, that's what I took out of it. But yeah, I would say it is difficult when you're known and you're an okay fish in a tiny pond, and then suddenly you're out of it. It does take a bit of time to adjust, but at the same time, I found my love for fishing back again. I actually go fishing when I want to go fishing rather than have to go fishing because I'm promoting this or I'm promoting that, or, I have to do a social media post here, there, or everywhere. So now I'm enjoying my time fishing again, which is super important.
That's nice. Do you know what? I was thinking in my mind whether I wanted to ask the question that you've already answered. And it must be a very difficult one. I know, I used the word big heart because of that exact reason that you said. And I was always very protective of you in the sense that I would hate to think people taking advantage. And I know you're smart enough to see that. But I know we've had a fair few arguments, and I know when I'd walk into your store with your sister, I'd say to her, I want you to listen to nothing he says because I wanted to buy everything at full price because I knew you'd try and give me a discount. And actually, we didn't have too much of an argument over breakfast this morning. You let me buy it, didn't you?
Well, I knew that there was no point. And, next time I'll do it even before you get the chance. I nearly did when you went for the loo, actually, but I thought it's going to annoy you. So I'll do the gentlemanly thing and let you pay for a change. But you're right. I mean, what's the saying? There's greater happiness in giving than receiving. And you know what? I enjoy trying to make other people happy. That makes me happy. And, if someone takes advantage, well, then they've taken advantage. And that's probably the best money you've spent. Do you know what I mean? You lend someone 20 quid and they never pay it back. Well, that 20 quid was well spent.
That's beautifully put. And I'll just wrap this up because this fish, we're sort of standing here thigh deep in freezing cold water at the moment. We're waiting to see if that fish will rise. He's on that tighter bank to us. We've got to sort of make a cast under a tree branch Toby's going to make it. He's not gone again. And I guess we'll watch this for a little bit and wait and see what happens. But it's exciting to see a fish rise. Like we say, the sun's behind us at the moment, and it's nice to see that. And like you say, that important point. And we live in a society now, I think we're moving away from this now, where people felt, well, I'm sort of Insta famous, so I should get free stuff. And it feels to me you were in the start of where that sort of happened, but I think we're moving away from that. And I think that's good for people. It's good for fishing and for people to focus on why we actually do it. Free stuff is lovely, but it's not going to change your life. It might bring you short-term happiness and some of the things that go with it. But I think we're moving away from that. Are you detecting that?
Yeah, 100%. I've always said, no one's famous in fishing. It's only fishing. If you asked 100 people on the street, do you know this person, that person, that maybe is well known within our industry, they wouldn't have a clue. So I think that people are starting to realise that it is only fishing. You'll always get one or two that, hop from brand to brand promoting this, that and the other. And, I don't begrudge people doing that because, everyone has to make a living, and it's hard making a living in fishing. Anyone thinks that, it's easy and that it's a dream job, having a fishing business or being a guide or whatever. Yes, it is. But at the same time, you're never going to become rich.
Good point. Now, this fish hasn't gone again. What do you think's the best strategy? We're going to offer him a nymph and see what happens, or do you think we wait a little bit longer? What do you fancy doing?
Well, I think we need to gink up this little bit of yarn because it's sinking pretty quick. And then wait for a couple of minutes, have a bit of a chin wag, and if it doesn't come up, I think we need to cover it over with a nymph, and let's, fingers crossed, get it.
Cool, man. I haven't fished down this area of the Exe for quite some time, and I think probably the last time I did was with Toby, and it was quite amusing that we were, a mutual friend of ours had organised a competition for an article he was going to write for a magazine, and it was to catch as many species of fish in a day as you possibly could. And so Toby and I hatched the plan. We were on one team, and the problem for me is I'm so uncompetitive that the guys, Toby and Howard, I even put them in the right place where we met and showed them where they'd catch a trout and stuff like that. And then there was a pond nearby that I know we caught some species in, and I showed them where to go and stuff like that. So I was probably never going to win it from that point of view. But we wanted to try, and we were meeting in Tiverton. And it was getting towards the end of the day. I said, well, we might be able to cinch it with a grayling. And the river, there'd been some rain, and the river had been quite big. And I nearly killed myself wading across the river to a spot where I knew there was a pretty good chance of catching a grayling. I caught probably the smallest ever grayling, and Toby's cheering me on from the safety of the bank. I've put the fish in my net, and it was one of the earlier mesh nets. The only downside of the silicone net was that the fish was so small. I got to within about 3 feet of Toby, and I think, did we have to get a photograph of it or something? Yeah, we had to get a photograph of it, and it slipped through the hole in the mesh, and that was gone, and we'd lost the competition as well, it turned out. But that was kind of fun, wasn't it?
Oh, excellent. And there's always some really cool stories. I don't know whether you were going to mention the one about the polecat that decided it wanted to chew my leg, but this thing just would not go away. And obviously it was a fairly tame polecat or something. I don't know.
And there's been some other stuff as well, because I was thinking about all the places that we fished, and we've caught grayling in Yorkshire, we've caught salmon in Cumbria, great big trout in Scotland on the borders there, and places like that. And I remember that trout that you caught, and we were fishing a river on the borders there. I won't name it, but we were fishing. There was a group of us up there, and I was sitting down for a bite to eat, and there was a fish that you were just beating the hell out of, weren't you? It was rising, and it wasn't eating, and then you hooked it, and I didn't think it was that big a fish, and I didn't even get up. I was busily enjoying my sandwich, think, well, this is quite nice, he'll have that in a minute. And it turned out it was quite a special fish. It was, how much was it in the air? How much did it weigh?
I think it was over 5. It's still my largest sort of UK wild brown trout. We had a great time up there, a few of us, didn't we? And different rivers. The fish was just on the munch, and I don't know how many casts I must have done to it. I thought it was quite a special fish. I could see it moving, and it, to be able to sight cast to a decent wild fish like that is really exciting. But it was pretty picky. Got it in the end, and yeah, still my largest wild brown. I mean, we've fished all over the place. We've done some saltwater fly fishing, haven't we, for the bass and things. And it's just nice to get out and try different things, whether you catch loads or not. I mean, today's not been our most successful day so far, but just to get out and chat and enjoy the sunshine and the company and, be by the water is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sort of kind of thinking as well, Toby, with all of his connections on the way up to that trip, was extraordinary. That, he said, well, look, and I stayed overnight, and he met me. I think you stayed overnight with me, actually, didn't you? And then he said, well, I'm going to make a call. I'm going to get us on the Eden.
Yeah.
And that was kind of cool as well. And it was a tidal section. It was lower down. And we sort of caught some trout that were rising. And then we decided to get the double handers out. And we got lucky there as well. And that was pretty cool as well, to be able to do that and catch salmon and stuff like that. And it is all these things that you remember. And I often talk on here about people having catch books and everything else, and I don't keep one, but I remember all these things vividly well. I hope those things sort of stay with me, that I can reflect on, and yeah, they're part of all of it, aren't they, really?
100%. I mean, that bit of river that we fished on, started out, like you say, as fishing for the brownies, and they were right on it, weren't they? It was amazing, and we were getting excited because obviously it was a prelude to going up to the other river, where we were purposely going up to fish dries and the hatch and all of that. But I've been told, you really need to give it a go on the salmon as well, because there's been a couple caught recently, and Pete, I'm not a great salmon angler. I will never, ever profess to be a great salmon angler.
Me neither.
But on that occasion, mate, what a fish you had. It was fresh as a daisy, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, I was very, very lucky. And it was just one of those instinct ones. And we were about to wind in, and I said to Tobe, I think I'm going to have one more go. One more. I'm going to let it go right over the lip of the pool. And thankfully it went tight, and managed to catch a really beautiful, special silver fish. So that was cool. But this is, again, almost sort of surreal that there's a footpath next to us. There's a lovely run in, and we're just sort of chatting away. We're not even fishing that hard, to be honest. I think if we were serious about it, we'd probably be nymphing. But Toby was saying that the bottom of the water here is, it is, and we're almost in the middle of Tiverton, really, and there's nowhere really for the fish to hunker down to get out of the way. He's worried about the mergansers, the cormorants and everything else, and all the changes that we've had on the river. And so, I think if we were a bit more serious about it, we'd probably I'm sort of holding the nymph rod while Toby's casting. And that's an important thing as well, isn't it? Knowing when you fish with somebody, knowing when it's somebody else's turn. That's, I've learned many lessons that way, that when to switch over. And I know with us, it just is very, very easy and slots in very, very easily. But that can be a difficult process sometimes as well, can't it?
100%. The thing is, Pete, both you and I would much rather you catch a fish. You would much rather I caught a fish. And if you look from that premise, I think that's maybe the guide in you in the past. And I've done a bit, obviously, for you in the past as well. But you get so much joy from sometimes taking maybe someone that hasn't been out very much, or showing them your part of the river, and you get as much joy actually, getting them onto a fish as you do yourself. Now, I am more competitive than you know that, but I still enjoy, just sharing a rod, talking. Like I say, it's not about numbers. It's just about enjoying the day, really.
It's funny you mentioned about the guiding as well, and you'd done some guiding with us. And I remember, I'm reminded of a piece, and if you ever get the chance to read it, Dylan Tamine has written a really fantastic book, and hopefully I'll get him on the podcast at some stage as well. But he talks about guiding and how guiding wasn't for him and how guiding isn't for everybody. And he talks about that he had a particularly difficult person that he was guiding with. and he was concentrating so hard at the back of their head. He was trying to make their head explode because he couldn't take any more of the day. Sadly, it didn't work for him and he had to go through it. But it's a beautifully, very amusing, very funny piece about being a fishing guide. And I know you had a time where, and I know we had a group of guides out on the day, and I think I was out with a bunch of people, and you and Luke had a bunch of people during Mayfly, and that was kind of a testing experience for you as well, wasn't it?
100%. Like I said, I love getting people into fish, but when you're literally, talking the fish on to the fly, and you've got probably the best fly hatch that you've seen on the river for years, and the fish are going absolutely nuts, and you've got someone that can't see a size 10 mayfly 10 yards away, it becomes very, very, very stressful. So, the positive thing is I got out afterwards and fished the spinnerfall, I think, and that was awesome. But, that's the things that test you. And I wouldn't ever call myself a particularly good guide because, I do want to get my customers, my clients into fish. And I do get frustrated if I can't do that. I take that as a personal slight on myself that I've not done my job properly. I'm very, very critical of myself, to be honest.
It was very funny though. I was on the other bank and I mouthed to Toby, "How's it going?" And all I could see him say, "He can't see the fly, he can't see the fly." But I think they caught some in the end. But yeah, it's not always the dream job that you think it is. Coming back to the fishing again, we're sort of entering into the town now, really. And it's very urban, stone wall. There's trees on the far side, nothing on our side. There's just a pathway and then like a flood wall, I guess. And then there's a ledge, and we've been walking along that and just been chatting. We've been fishing just the bamboo and the indicator. And Toby said he saw a fish just rise up almost opposite where we're standing. And I covered it a number of times, tried to induce it, nothing. And then we got the Euro setup out, and Toby hooked the fish, which just came off after a few moments. I think, have you seen another one, did you say?
I think I just saw a rise then.
Yeah, he thinks he's seen a rise as well, so that's encouraging. And it looks as though, you try and rationalise these things. Was it, a fish? There's a few olives been on the water, like 1, 2, 3 flies. That's been about it. But seeing that fish move up in the water column was encouraging. Yeah, he's got one now. So, yeah, that's another one for the microphone. Another grayling, about half a pound or so, 3/4 of a pound, something like that in there. And so it may be that set up here. The water's not particularly deep. It's probably about thigh deep. But the 2 nymphs is clearly working a lot better. That presentation of the flies is working in this situation a whole lot better, and that's encouraging to see. Yeah, and he's been manipulating the fly a little bit as well, so that's kind of helped. Just see a midge in front of me. The sun's out. It's cold. I've got the hood of my fleece up as well, although I was just seeing a kid walking along in a T-shirt, which makes me feel a bit inadequate, I have to say, but there we go anyway. But yeah, that's interesting to see. So, 2 setups. There's something we can take from this. The 2 setups does make a little bit of a difference. I'm going to persevere. So what I've done after Toby hooked that fish was change things up. And I changed the fly for starters, made it a little bit bigger. I think it's a Frenchie, the pattern's called. It's black nymph, silver bead, silver thread with some red on the back. And then added a foot or so of tippet as well to see if that would get me into the game just a little bit more. So we're sort of standing along this ledge. It's about 2.5, 3 feet wide, and then just working the water that's running against it. So it's not a long cast by any means, but I sort of sent a few up with the bamboo rod and the single nymph, and then Toby's followed through. And the fish, I suppose because it's near a footpath, don't seem as spooky. The one I said we saw rise in the water, I'd been casting further upstream, and it didn't seem to, just seen another fish rise here now as well. So that's encouraging. Toby's just flipped the nymphs over. So this may be that moment that we actually see something happen. So we'd seen the fish rise, and decided, instead of flipping the nymph at it with dry, I put it on a deer hair emerger. The rod feels completely different with the dry on it, and nothing there. So I put a slightly bigger olive on just to see. But by the time I just flipped the flies on, made the changes, clouds come over, and that stopped. As is often the case, winter fishing, that those windows are incredibly short and don't last long, and you got to try and take advantage. And we tried to take advantage, but it didn't work. So what we're doing is we've got the Euro nymph set up that Toby's working on. Sun's sort of just behind some clouds, just come out again, and we're hoping if that sort of gets through into the water a little bit, that perhaps that might provoke some more nymphs to hatch, and perhaps the fish to move up with them as well. We'll have to wait and see, but we've barely moved. It's an interesting bit of water, as I described previously, and we're coming into what I'd describe more nymphy water in the next 20-25 feet. But there's an absence of bugs on the water at the moment. But yeah, if we see something rise, then we're prepared for it and we'll throw at it. So we saw a fish rise, and I had the indicator on and just tied the dry on. I suppose it's a bit of a half-hearted attempt at the dry, and I had a fish came and move at it but didn't commit. And they're really funny. I've always got a real yips with these fish, because I find them really hard, the grayling on the X, to hit on a dry a lot of the time. And it's just a personal thing more than anything else. And I was saying to Toby, well, fish comes and eats it, I'm going to miss it anyway. But so we decided, and I'd sort of mentioned it to Toby, and then he said, yeah, I think I'd probably take the indicator off and see, because we wondered with that fish refusing the dry, whether it was the indicator it was seeing first and it made it have a second thought. So we thought, fine. Saw another fish rise, managed to get the fly out, and it sort of came up, and I was saying to Toby, oh God, we saw it, looked like he ate it, lifted, nothing there. And then we're literally just casting out. I was thinking about, right, I'm going to record something to talk about what had just happened, was thinking about that, and then the fly was probably 3 or 4 feet downstream of me, and Toby sort of pushing me as the grayling had risen up to have a look at it. And so I didn't set on that one. He's got the dry on now at the moment. We've got like an olive pattern on. He's dancing it around a little bit more to see if that'll bring someone into play. But it's been encouraging to see that happening. So sometimes making, I suppose at winter time it can easily be a half-hearted effort, because that window's going to be tiny. We hadn't seen that many fish rise, that was about it. And I wouldn't call it intense. They were real once a fish. But it's been encouraging to see that. You make a little bit of a change, you put a little bit more effort in, and lo and behold, something can happen. It was just user or operator error that didn't make it stick. But as I said, I've always had problems. And I said to Toby, well, any advice on hitting these fish? What is the advice on hitting these grayling on dries?
Well, I'm not going to swear, but I'm not sure that there is any advice on the X. Obviously, it's like anything. The grayling, as you saw, are dropping back to take the dry. So they're inspecting it as they're dropping back to rise. So I think it's a case of just trying to control your emotion and not stick the hook, as they say, too quickly. It's just tough, especially when you can see the fish. I mean, we're fishing today, and normally the River X has a bit of a tinge of colour, but today it's pretty clear. It's still virtually impossible to see any fish on the bottom. And then when you're looking upstream and you see the odd fish pop, I've covered a couple and bumped a couple and hooked, them once they've risen. But it's hard. But then that's not the point, is it? The point is just giggling. I mean, me and you started giggling when that one came up, just because I just had one come and have a look then. But he refused. It's about fun. I keep saying this word, fun. And you don't have to hook it sometimes to have had the enjoyment of seeing the fish be deceived by your fly and come up and then flip the fin at you, basically.
That's the funny thing about these rises, though, aren't they? They're not, we talk, many people who are regular grayling anglers and know about that, the bubble and all that sort of stuff. And I know trout sometimes do cause those, but, grayling, you're looking, and you just don't see that with them here. It's almost a vertical sort of take, isn't it? And I don't know if that's something to do with what makes them difficult, because the first fly I put on was a deer herder emerger, which I thought, well, if the fly's in the water, because I knew they, from past experience there, I personally find them harder to touch on a dry. But yeah, I just wondered, by sitting the hook in the fly, I went to an olive dun that we've got on now, a little bit bigger, to see if it would bring them up. And I've not managed. And I think the one, he had a good look. I thought I waited, lifted into it, and there was nothing there, sort of thing. So it seems to me almost as if the rises are a law unto themselves to a degree, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's more of an instinct thing. I don't think they're feeding, really. The odd fish is coming down, and maybe, we've had very high water a little while back, and maybe they're just thinking about now having a look and, taking a fish. Bear in mind, I've just got to say as well, I'm just casting this cane rod with the dry. Oh, it is absolutely stunning. And if people have never tried modern cane, you really must give it a go. It's not sloppy. It's, it's a touch heavier than your carbon rods or your graphite or graphene or whatever they're using these days. But absolute joy to cast with. It's phenomenal.
I'm pleased you're enjoying it. And it is, I've found, from an accuracy point of view, there's not a lot of lateral movement either. It is pretty true that it goes where you aim it, sort of stuff. It's not sort of bouncing around all over the place, which is encouraging. But the hunt for a February dry fly grayling continues, and we'll see what we can come up with. So Toby called the play that, the fish that we'd seen had a look at the dry and suggested a really short dropper underneath the dry, tiny little nymph underneath. We'd sort of covered fish and no real joys. And then Toby had a go, and he talked about a friend of his had fished some spiders here and down and across, and we talked about that, and he let his dry go downstream and then just gave it a little bit of a tweak every now and again with the rod more than anything else. And lo and behold, I had a fish, and I did likewise and had one. So Roger, the net has been christened. My Eden made net has been christened now, so I'm really pleased about that. So that was good. My reel, everything else. So I'm always funny. I always think I'm not superstitious, but with fishing, for some stupid reason, I am. And things like caps have to be right. If I'm not catching a fish and I'm wearing a new cap, I'm uncomfortable with that. And it's always nice when you've sort of broken your duck with something new. Obviously, the rod I've been lucky enough to catch a number of fish on, but with the new reel and new net and stuff like that, you want to get them wet and get them used, and it's been nice from that point of view. So, sometimes these calls in play, and where the fish hadn't hit the dries cleanly, that's obviously made a little bit of a difference. We've not seen, and I will stress that, this isn't a big riseathon that's going on here. There've been once of rises, we try to cover them and gone from there. They're certainly not hard on it at the moment, but sometimes you've got to tweak things around a little bit to find the fish, and Toby found a method of doing it. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Toby, that since, and I know you've been using the word enjoyment a lot in this podcast, and I know that, and I know having fished with you with a number of years, and I know you said when you stopped or when you sold Funky that you were enjoying your fishing a whole lot more. Did you ever feel sort of, I think I know the answer, but do you fish differently as a result of not being the guy from Funky?
To a degree. I mean, I've not ever really given a toss what people think of me, to be brutally honest. At the end of the day, I know there's people out there that like me, and there's people out there that don't like me, and you can't be all things to all people. So I've always tried to fish how I want to fish. When I had the business, there was different pressures because you had to be trying out new materials. You had to be, something new came in, you'd go out, you'd catch a fish, you'd take a photograph of the fly, maybe get one of the team members to tie something up, and, different pressures. Whereas now, I was going to sit down last night and tie half a dozen flies just for this trip. I can't be bothered, to be brutally honest. And, I think that a lot of the time people put too much emphasis on flies and that sort of thing, when actually, presentation is a lot more key. I mean, we've just had a couple of fish in quick succession, and we both worked out kind of what was happening. Really, the fish are taking, but they're needing to be induced. They needed to be tempted to take, rather than coming up. The odd fish has been rising, but it has been the odd. I've covered them with nymphs and had them. You've covered them with the dry and had them sort of come up, but it's been a bit half-hearted. So it's just excuse me. It's just just enjoyment again. Just that's I keep coming back to it. I don't fish any differently really to what I did before, but now I fish for myself rather than because I have to.
Nice, yeah. And it is, we barely moved. We haven't moved probably in the last 2 hours. We probably moved
150 yards.
Yeah, 150 yards, if that. And it's not been a lot. And we've been patient. We've waited. We've tried. We've mixed things up a little bit. And it's, been able to figure stuff out a little bit, which has helped things a great deal. We've not had a lot to go at as well, so it's made you probably think about it a little bit more. And I think we're both, Toby spotted a fish just in front of us actually, and so we can hear the dogs in the background. There's people walking along, somebody doing the gardening on the other side, and I kind of like that part of it as well. And people are sort of stopping when you hook a fish and watching and stuff like that, and I kind of enjoy all of this as well. But yeah, figuring it out on a relatively tough day has been an interesting one. And somebody I've not done any. This is the first grayling I've caught this winter season. I've not done any, and Toby called that play much quicker, and I'm generally pretty quick to call something. But I was saying to him, the fishing I do now, and even when I was lucky enough in the podcast we did in Argentina, we're casting dries sometimes for rising fish, but into spots, whereas we're fishing the water here today, except when we see those odd rises. And generally, for me, my fishing generally now is fishing to fish. So it just goes to show that though it's a form of fishing, and certainly with Toby, I've done for many, many years with him, fishing the water, it's something I haven't done so much of, particularly when I've not really been fishing over this winter session or this winter season at all. So it just goes to show, if you're out doing it and thinking about it and thinking about your fishing when conditions aren't giving you the fish easily, then don't be afraid to make changes. And it's lucky when you've got a friend who calls that one as well. We're sort of standing up high, and one of the flatter bits we talked to you about this morning when we'd gone upstream of the weir, because our hope was that we might see something move. And it's interesting that we've got a pretty good view into the water. The thing to bear in mind, I guess, is that, as Toby was saying, the grayling are really hard to spot. But you could look into the water from up here and think, actually, there's nobody there. It's almost deceiving, or it means how well camouflaged these fish actually are. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, you can look at something and think it's completely devoid of fish. Like when we were fishing earlier, and then that fish rose like 10, 12 foot away from us. And you could see the bottom, you couldn't see the fish. And it's just amazing. And then all you're looking for is just that little unusual movement that can key your eye in. And you keep watching that little bit of water, and then suddenly you can just sort of make out a fish. But at the moment, I'm seeing absolutely nothing. But it's not to say there's none there.
It's funny, it reminds me, and we built, when I first moved to guide at the Fox and Hounds, the first opening day, it was just me and you, wasn't it? And it grew into something quite big, and what we'd do is just open the doors and everyone would come fishing. But the amount of times we fished there, and you'd think there were no fish in the river, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Open day, you'd be lucky if you got a fish. But then, give it a month, and with a bit of a hatch, it's completely the opposite. And you just wonder where all these fish go sometimes. But they're still there, they're just not feeding, or they're dormant, or they're only feeding for such a short period of time. I said to you a minute ago, I think that it's switched off. It just had that feeling. No real, change to the water or anything. It just felt like the fish had gone, well, we've had our 20 minutes. We've had one or two bits to eat. That's it now. We're just going to sit on the bottom and wait for the next lot.
And that probably, I sort of floated it in front of Toby as well. Perhaps we should go and have a cup of coffee and a bit of cake somewhere. So I think that's going to be the plan. It has been always super chilled, super good fun. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been really cool. And I like I always try and do with these things, get a little bit, so you get to know the person as well a little bit more. And I think with this, it's been really nice just to chat about some of the stuff we've done and some of the places we've been, and get to know about somebody who built a really impressive brand in a very, very difficult marketplace. And I've been incredibly proud to know Toby, and incredibly proud to see how dramatically and successfully that business has grown, and to see him still loving his fishing as much as he always has done. So, mate, it's been brilliant to catch up. It's been brilliant fishing with you, as always. That was pretty good fun, though, wasn't it? It was tough, but pretty good fun. Awesome, mate. And the thing is, I think we just need to try and make a bit more effort together to get out. It's just, life takes over sometimes, but certainly I've got a funny feeling we're going to be fishing a little bit more together this year. Well, that would be really cool. So this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the day after the BFFI. I wasn't there on the Sunday, but it was there on the Saturday. And thank you to the amount of people who came up. And I'd not had the pleasure of meeting you before, but told me you'd enjoyed the magazine or you'd enjoyed this podcast. And thank you. That meant a hell of a lot to me. And it was lovely to meet you. So this is the end of this episode. But as ever, there'll be plenty more coming down the line.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.